collar-and-elbow wrestling is a style of folk wrestling native to Ireland that can be traced back to the 17th century, but it has ties to the Games of Tailtinn between 632 BC and 1169 AD. Though originating in Ireland, the style flourished in America. Collar-and-elbow features an array of trips, mares, throws, hip-locking, shin-kicking, pinning combinations, and submissions. History. Origins in Ireland. The origins of Irish collar-and-elbow are not known. According to historian Edward MacLister, it was an organized sport as early as the 17th century in which the more prominent wrestlers were able to earn a living. Douglas Hyde tells of a wrestling bout that took place in Connacht in his Amrain Cuig Connacht. A young wrestler known as Ladia took up the challenge issued by the champion of the town of Sligo. This man had been living at the expense of the town, as was the custom of the day, and had killed several men in earlier bouts. He was a greatly feared man and not overly loved by the people of Sligo. Odds were 10 to 1 that the challenger would fall. The two met on the public greens in front of the mass of townspeople. Ladia latched onto his opponent and held him to the ground, breaking his neck. The astonished crowd, silent with awe for a moment, cheered the new champion. Of course, the new champion had nothing to fear from the law, as this was a legal contest with an unfortunate ending. United States. Although collar-and-elbow was seen as a common man's sport in Ireland, it was considered a gentleman's pastime in several areas of the colonies. It was part of the curriculum at the Reverend James Morey's Academy in Fredericksburg, Virginia. George Washington, at the age of 18, held a collar-and-elbow championship that was at least county-wide. 28 years later, in command of the Continental Armies, he demonstrated his wrestling skill by dealing flying mares to 7 volunteers from Massachusetts. Washington was not the only grappling president of the United States. Zachary Taylor, William Howard Taft, Chester A. Arthur and Calvin Coolidge also practiced at one time or another the style of collar-and-elbow. In the late 18th century, the style came to Vermont with some of the Irish settlers and had a home in the church. It flourished in the Vermont area for over 100 years and, during that time, spread across the globe as it mixed with other styles. In the mid-19th century, rules were loosely created to ban the use of biting, butting and scratching. These were known as the "Duff rules," named after their originator and famous collar-and-elbow champion, Henry Moses Duff. Collar-and-elbow found much success in mixed-style competitions against styles such as Lancashire wrestling, Greco-Roman wrestling, and others. Often these matches were contested best 3 out of 5 falls. The full stipulations would then be agreed upon by both competitors. Example: John McMahon vs. William Miller. 2 rounds, catch as you can, above the waist with jackets. 2 falls, catch as you can, without jackets, tripping allowed, and if a 5th fall become necessary, the competitors would coin toss to determine who chooses. But this was never exclusive. In the latter days of collar-and-elbow's popularity, matches consisted of 2 out of 3 falls, 1 fall jacket collar-and-elbow, 1 fall Greco-Roman, and 1 fall catch as you can. Some of collar-and-elbow's techniques exist today within catch wrestling, in addition to freestyle wrestling and wrestling in general. Collar-and-elbow's influence can also be seen in modern professional wrestling's use of the collar-and-elbow tie-up, which is utilized as the initial starting position in a majority of professional wrestling matches. Irish martial arts are known to teach collar-and-elbow techniques within their choreographed curriculum. Correct translates as wrestle. In the case of IMA, the term is used in general referring to grappling, not the old style of Irish backhold wrestling by the same name, which also exists within IMA's correct training, while collar and elbow in Ireland competitions seem to hold more focused on standing-based jacket techniques. In America, it utilized more non-jacketed techniques plus many ground-based pins and submissions. Edward Gallagher was in particular considered a fine collar and elbow wrestler, who was considered the driving force behind collegiate wrestling in the state of Oklahoma. He released 2 manuals, Wrestling, wherein collar and elbow was adapted for Olympic competition rules, and Amateur Wrestling, wherein he had adapted it after exposure to judo and catcher's catch-can. The Magnificent Scufflers by Charles Morrow Wilson in 1959 was seen as more a documentation on the history, evolution and characteristics of collar and elbow more than an actual instructional manual, but also mentioned that collar and elbow had borrowed many techniques from way of catcher's catch-can, showing that it had clearly become more well-rounded in its later days. Characteristics and rules. It was the smaller man who usually excelled in this style. It is said that practitioners would utilize balance and speed to achieve positioning so that strength could then be applied towards the leverage gained. It was practiced both with and without jackets with double sewn seams. Footwear was banned from being worn in competition early on due to the kicking and tripping techniques employed. The wrestlers who practiced this style referred to themselves as scufflers and trippers. An impromptu scuffling match was known as a scuffling bee. While there is no evidence showing that the Irish style of collar and elbow wrestling in Ireland was a ground fighting game, the Irish who came to the United States in the late 18th and early 19th century had a style that included a fairly large amount of ground wrestling, which goes against the mold of other indigenous styles. It works for a throw then a pinning combination. The beginning stance is the foundation of the style as well as the origin of its name. The wrestlers face each other, grabbing the elbow with the left hand and the collar area with the right hand. This very stance forced the scufflers to use technique rather than a bull rush on their opponent. The initial collar and elbow grip tie-up could not be intentionally broken and instead must be broken by the opponent. Once, if the grip is broken, the competitors were then allowed to catch any grip possible. The collar and elbow grip also varied depending on the competitors. Which hand gripped which area was strictly preference caused by the competitor's dominant side. The beginning of the match was often a test of strategy and balance. The scufflers would try to circle each other clockwise while a series of unbalancing maneuvers, including kicking and tripping, would be played out by both combatants. This stage of the match could last a very long time. Indeed, there are accounts where the standing portion of the match had lasted over an hour. Inevitably, a takedown would occur. A flying mare or a snap mare was a common takedown. A mare was a throw in which the feet of the thrown opponent actually were higher than his head. Ground wrestling began after one or both of the scufflers hit the ground. Half Nelsons and various grapevines and other ground control techniques were then employed. A match was originally won only when all 4 points of the body were pinned to the ground for the count of 5. 4 points meaning both shoulders and both points of the hips. In the late 19th century, the requirement to win was lessened to a 3-point touch. The Irish style of collar and elbow originally resembled that of Cornish wrestling. The American style featured, or possibly evolved to feature, a wide array of pinning techniques and submissions performed with and without a jacket. It appears that many of the techniques had names derived from things found in the work environments. mares, windmills, grapevines, etc. Common terms: scuffler, tripper, title given to practitioners of collar and elbow. Mare refers to any throw which causes the opponent's feet to go over his head. Grapevine refers to any type of technique which entangles the limbs of an opponent. Grass down refers to an opponent being thrown to the ground. Points down refers to an opponent being pinned to the ground. Common technique: standing the tripit, similar to ko-uchi-igari. The loose leg, similar to o-uchi-igari. Howard's hank, similar to ko-soto-gaki. The flying hobby, similar to harai-surikomi-ashi. The buttock, also called the cross buttock, similar to ogoshi. Flying mare, similar to ippon-seoinage. Snap mare, similar to flying mare, only grasping the opponent's head rather than arm, sometimes done on one knee. The double touch, speculated to be a method of blocking an attempted leg sweep. The blackguard snatch, speculated to be more than likely a means of unbalancing than an actual takedown. The whip, used alone as an unbalancing technique, used in combination with a quick leg trip. The back heel, similar to osoto-gari. The hip lock, head and arm hip throw. Outside lock, similar to the hip lock, but the arm is grabbed with both hands. Inside lock, similar to uchimata. Arm and leg hold, similar to fireman's carry takedown. The octus, similar to sprawling, only standing upright. Leg trip, similar to diashi barai. Double leg hold, alternate name for the double leg takedown. Heave to rear, similar to uranage. Scissor sweep. Ground collar sleeper, similar to cross lapel choke. Sleeper hold, similar to rear naked choke. Nelson and crotch, multiple variations, similar to various cradle pins. Bridging up, refers to being on your back, and pushing yourself up on elbows and feet to prevent pinning and to quickly rise back to feet. The hip bump, mentioned in The Magnificent Scufflers as a standing technique, possibly similar to osoto-gari. Other grappling styles mention it as a means of rolling an opponent off of you. Overarm hook, mentioned in The Magnificent Scufflers as a way to counter a leg takedown. Forearm hook, mentioned in The Magnificent Scufflers as a type of takedown. Body scissors, similar to the guard in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Back body scissors, similar to rear mount in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Double wrist lock, similar to the Kimura lock. Scissored arm lock, to scissor one's legs around the opponent's arm in hopes of keeping the shoulder down. Double leg grapevine, method of straightening out the opponent's legs to pin down his hips, often combined with an arm lock or arm hold of some sort to establish a three-point pin via both hips and one shoulder. Head scissors, also done with a double arm lock. Full Nelson. Half Nelson, also a far half Nelson and near half Nelson as variations. Three-quarters Nelson, standing toe and ankle hold. Reverse full Nelson, reverse half Nelson, double leg Nelson, cross arm ride, similar to rear mount, only attacks legs are scissored around one of opponents and alternate arm is grabbed. Inverted half Nelson, similar to side mount, only with an arm around the head and blocking the forearm. Key lock, similar to the Americana.